Hey guys, welcome. I'm your host, Amy Post. Welcome to Advocacy and Hope. I appreciate your time today, and that's something that we can never get back. So, as always, I really appreciate you guys taking a little bit of time out of your day to just listen and see what we have in store for you. This guest today is someone that I've tried to have on the show. We had a couple of incidences where I was ill, and we have finally gotten him on the show. He's just an extraordinary individual, one of those just powerful people. He is a father, a husband, an author of 9 books, a podcast host, and just an all-around extraordinary businessman and an extraordinary person. Mike Abramowitz, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Amy, for having me. I appreciate it. Amy, the host, Amy Post. I like that. So it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, once again, thank you. I'm truly excited because you just have so much going on, and I met you. It seems like it was yesterday, but I think it was, mid-year last year. You and my husband met each other at the Front Row Dads, which I absolutely love that group of men, and just it's something that has really saved our marriage, saved our life. These guys just are extraordinary, such as yourself. And so I was just very blessed to get to be introduced to you. You just superhuman individuals, but great hearts, faith driven. Couldn't ask for a better group of guys. And I am a female, but I love these men groups. I love these groups for the husbands and really just getting you guys together. So I really think it was very cool how we met. So with that being said, I'd love to just kind of dive in a little bit about, who you are, tell the audience a little bit about you, and we'll kind of go from there. I mean, you've got all the books behind you, all the cool stuff that we want to talk about, but yeah, let's just kind of start, who you are and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Amy. Yeah, Front Row Dads has been transformative for me, and hanging out with Eric. We partnered up and interviewed one another, and such a solid human. I really enjoyed my conversations with your husband. I'll do story time with Mike. I'll go give the overview of who I am, so that way you and the listeners kind of understand and kind of go on the journey with me, and then we could park in any of the places that make the most sense. So, grew up in New Jersey as the youngest of 8, and went to college over in the University of South Florida in Tampa. So I left Jersey, went to college, pursued my industrial engineering degree, where I graduated. I paid my entire way through college selling Cutco kitchen knives, so with vector marketing. So I started selling Cutco at 18, paid my way through school. And then when I graduated from college, I took a career position within Cutco and Vector to teach other students to do what I did as a college kid. And what I did as a college kid, not only did I fund my education, but I earned about 6 figures as a college kid. I invested in real estate. I bought my first house when I was 20. And by the time I graduated, I had 3 rental properties. The second of those 3 was with my mom's life insurance money. Unfortunately, mom passed when I was 20. She got diagnosed with ovarian cancer when I was 16, and then passed right before my 21st birthday. So being the youngest, that was super tough. And then 22, I was, recovered as much as I possibly can. I was trying to get ahead. My mentors gave me the book Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was like 18. So it was all like, how can I retire at 40 and like build this beautiful life and have a lot of net worth and all this stuff. But then the market collapsed 2008 when I graduated college. So I had these 3 rental properties. I started my own direct sales company with vector marketing, and then the market collapsed. So not only did I lose the properties, I also lost $130,000 of my own money. I was in debt, 130 grand. I had a 400 credit score. I was near bankrupt. My relationship at the time of 7 years ended. I started having like fairly unhealthy eating habits. I didn't really want to get off the couch much. So I call that the valley of my 20s of just grinding and working and just trying to do everything I can to get back to where I was. And then that was a really tough season. From there, I got invited to go to my first Tony Robbins event circa 2012, 2013. And so I walked across fire. I'm now a 7-time fire walker. So went to my Tony Robbins event, UPW, and he said that my mess is my message. And that was one of the biggest takeaways from that first event. So I left that event and I spoke for 300 hours to the Pinellas County School District to figure out what that message was. So that was the launching pad of my first book, Grab Tomorrow, Your Best Year Ever. That was my first book that I launched, which hit #1 on the bestseller list on Amazon when we launched it. And those 300 hours turned into that book, but also led to the 9 books, which led to also a passion project called PB&J for Tampa Bay, where we ended up raising up donations and thousands of volunteers, and we ended up providing over 100,000 meals to less fortunate over the course of, really 2015 through COVID. Which was a really great project. The challenge that I was experiencing, though, is as I was crafting my message, figuring out my purpose, writing the books, book signing events, speaking engagements, running my direct sales business, trying to climb myself out of this hole, I realized there was no time for a relationship. I was sacrificing this piece of my life. So when I met my now wife, when we first started dating, 2014, it was just like, it was a good season for dating, but there was no way that I was going to be able to like be a husband and the father that I wanted to be. My dad missed a lot of basketball games growing up, and I didn't really want to do that. My dad owns a plumbing business. He's still, to this day, he's 83 years old, works 6 days a week inside his plumbing business. It's his ambition, his drive, his work ethic is incredible. But at the same time, I just didn't want that for myself. So I hired my first business coach in 2016. His experience was he helped scale a company in India from $6 million to $30 million and had a staff and a team of 1,400 people underneath him. So he came back to the States and started teaching entrepreneurs and small business owners how to corporatize their small business. I was his first client. So 2016, I hired him, and we put in all these systems into my business so I could be a more present dad and father when we entered into that next season. As I proposed to my wife, 2017, we got married in October 21st, 2017. So by 2018, 2019, I had all these systems in place to be able to work from home, virtual everything, Zoom everything, just remote, all of it put in place, offshore virtual assistants, installed tech solutions and automations, like all these cool things before AI was a thing. And then COVID hit. 2020, it was all systems go. It was like, all right, we were equipped. We were poised for success. So we provided over 1,000 jobs that year in 2020. We did over $2.5 million in sales through my office and just absolutely crushed it. And during that time, I mean, my wife and I took an 18-day road trip. We did $100,000 sales weeks during that 18 days. It was amazing. But the true test really happened New Year's Eve of 2020 when my son was born. So our son, James, was born at 26 weeks. He was measuring 23 weeks at 1 pound, 4 ounces. So we didn't know how long we were going to be in the hospital with him, but I let my staff know and I said, hey, I don't know how long I'm going to be in the hospital, but you guys got it. Well, my wife and I ended up being in the hospital for 254 days, so 8.5 months with James. He was suspended on a ventilator. He had his trach, tube fed, and we got out of the hospital September 10th. And September 10th, 2021, I called my coach and I said, hey, my wife is now a full-time medical mom. She had to leave her corporate job where she was making 80 grand a year, and I got to figure out how to replace her income while doing everything that I was already doing. Do you think that we could teach people how to do what I did? Because while I was in the hospital, my business created $250,000 in revenue and 6 figures in profits without me there. So because of all those systems we put in place, I had bought back my time freedom. And he said, let's find out. So we created a partnership. So that coach, Andrew Biggs, is now my business partner with what we do with Better Than Rich. So now we've now helped hundreds of other business owners install systems and virtual assistants and team and tech and all these different playbooks to help them buy back time. So that way they could reinvest that time to what matters most to them. And it's not necessarily they're all in the situation that I was in, but if they wanted to take a vacation without a cell phone, or if they wanted to go to their kid's soccer game or take a personal day, like we're helping these students and our clients have that type of freedom. And that's what we've been spending our time doing. And what's really cool is I was able to retire from Cutco after 20 years of that business this past December to go full tilt and do this. Even though that business was running without me, I just said, this is the place. This is who I'm meant to serve. I served over 5,000 young professionals during my 20 years with Cutco. And now I'm serving this demographic of these high earning business owners who are just like not time rich yet. They have a family, they have a business, and they really want to spend that time on what matters most to them. So I feel called to help that demographic and that audience. So that's exactly what we're doing right now. So that is the story. It's a very long story, but I like to give the context because there's so many different places that we can go depending on what is most relevant to your audience. And yeah, so thanks for letting me share, Amy. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Mike, I love that because, two parts. You guys faced huge challenges, you and your wife. It's really tough to go through most daily challenges, with a spouse and, living with someone, something so brand new, just really kind of getting to know the intricates. But then you go through something so challenging, such as a child diagnosed with something, or being in the hospital due to some ailment or illness. And it's I think I talked to you about this when, I first met you, and I've talked about it on all of my podcasts. It's that 90-10, that 90-10% rule that just always stuck in the back of my head. On the first day that, we were kind of dumped off in the hospital, and, our mentor slash liaison was like, children die, Amy, and, 90% of the couples get divorced. You just need to prepare yourself. And so that's always kind of lingered in the back of my head, and really kind of just fueled this fire behind me to figure out, why the 90% and why the 10%. How, and so really kind of digging in and talking to people about that. So I absolutely love that. I think there's so many things that we can talk about, but I do want to kind of take a step back too. You're such a powerhouse and a go-getter, but you're so positive, and just, you seem to have so many different, cool angles that you've gone within your career. What did that look like as a kid growing up? I mean, did you have like someone that, I know you're with your father, it sounds like he was a very hard worker, but what did that look like? Your influences, your mentors, things that you just looked at, and how did you kind of get to be the person you are now?
I love that question. I also want to make sure I capture this because I didn't say it, but my son is doing great now. He is off the
Good,
ventilator. He was vent dependent for 2 years, but he's off the ventilator. He's thriving. He just started school.
good.
And then we also have our daughter, Ella, who was just born in December. So she's now 3 months old. She was our fifth embryo, or our fifth pregnancy, I should say, fourth embryo, fifth pregnancy,
Wow.
and the first one that had zero complications. She was frozen the same time as James. So they're technically twins, which is interesting. But I just wanted to make sure that was captured because things are going really well right now. As far as me as
Good.
a kid, I witnessed my dad, as I mentioned, super ambitious, hardworking, dedicated to his work, provider. My mom, unbelievably compassionate. She was the epitome of an open door policy for our home. She had 6 kids from 3 different marriages, but we all grew up very close. So my oldest brother's like 20 years older than me, as an example. But every single one of her kids had a friend with a broken home that my mom let stay at our house for an extended period of time. It's just wild to think about it, but like I grew up with a quote unquote stranger living in my home and not thinking anything different. It was just, oh, that's my sister's friend Tracy, or that's my sister's friend Sharon, or that's my friend Rob, or like it was just like that's just who it was. It was never weird. It was never anything. We had like dogs and cats and birds and rabbits. I mean, she was just so open and welcoming and just such a strong human. And when she got diagnosed with cancer, just seeing her demonstrate moral courage and optimism the entire time, I learned a lot from her. I learned a lot from that season. I also, those are a lot of the examples. My older siblings, a lot of them, like my brother Scott loves to travel, creating these signature experiences, really great. My brother Adam, he was always like the poster child of a dad, like he has 4 kids. So, and my nephew, his oldest son is 3 years younger than me, as an example. So, I just kind of hung out with him and be like, wow, like that's what it means. So I had a lot of these examples of what it means to be great at a lot of different things, but I also had a lot of warnings. There was a lot of warning signs from a lot of my parents and a lot of my siblings, being the youngest. My mom was married 3 times, my dad twice, one of my brothers 3 times, my sister twice. So that means there's a lot of divorce. There's a lot of fighting in different cases, a lot of money problems, a lot of arguments over debt, and poor decision making and spending more than they have, right? Like a lot of warnings. So me being able to see that, that's part of the reason why I left. I left New Jersey as Michael and became Mike when I moved to Florida. And that's when I started selling Cutco. Really, after my freshman year, those mentors inside that business, like Matt King specifically, really poured into me, feeding me books and knowledge and wisdom and leadership that I didn't know that I had inside of me, but he really helped me tap into that. I mean, as an example, I had cornrows and a big fro before I went in for my Cutco interview, as an example. So it's kind of fun to just reminisce on the just those versions of who I was and who I've become from those seasons.
I think that's super important. I mean, I can't imagine, with what happened to your mother. I'm so sorry. It's such a sad thing, to know that you lost her, so early, but yet it's so cool that you can, remember those things and take away, her courage and her optimism and how she was. That's extraordinary because, being in that position, I think can just bring all kinds of different emotions and different feelings. And then your father, hardworking, and I'm sure that that was absolutely very, very difficult for him and difficult for the whole family. So kudos to you guys, and especially to you, just finding that positivity through it and seeing that within her and taking that with you, because I think those kinds of things with cancer can really take a toll on you. And I know it did with me, but I think everybody, has the different perspective. So wow, that's amazing. I love what it taught you. And I love that, it kind of just really shows as I even like sit here and look at you today, because we've never actually met. We see each other all the time on a Zoom, and I think I already know you. And it's just great to learn this about you. It's super cool. Well, I mean, keep going. I mean, I love that about your life. And I love that I mean, it sounds like you had just a lot of different influences, but talk a little bit more about, your experiences kind of with your siblings, and then kind of where you went, after that point.
What's interesting is when I left Jersey and kind of just started to create my own independence, I only saw everyone maybe once or twice a year, maybe three times at most, and everything stayed the same. So every time I went up there, it was just like picking up where we left off, and everything stayed the same. So while I was like down here just like learning and working and going to school and selling and make my own money, being independent, everything up there was pretty much the same outside of just people growing older in age. And at some point, I don't know when, it was probably around maybe I was 30. I'm 30, I'll be 39 this June, but somewhere around like age 30, late 20s, early 30s, there was this giant pendulum swing where even though everyone was growing up in age, the amount of like information that I was consuming from books and learnings and workshops and seminars, and like how much I was investing in self-improvement and personal growth, I almost like became this like weird outcast of the family, where it's like my dad said to me recently, he came down in December when Ella was born. He's just like, I can't even talk to you now because you're such an intellectual. And I was like, I don't know if that's an insult or a compliment, right? Like, so it's just so interesting on how that's pendulum swung, not because I wanted this hierarchy of like, I'm up here and they're down here, you peasants aren't as smart or anything. It's just, I feel like I've overcorrected on some parts. And again, I don't know if it's a positive or negative, but I just overcorrected so much of figuring out like what is in my control or my sphere of influence and what is not. And if it's not in my control, I'm going to accept it and move on. But if it is in my sphere of influence or my control, I'm going to do something about it. And learning, journaling, hiring coaches, joining mastermind groups, joining communities where people have common unity, where we have the same interests. We want to be a part of the same problem solving initiatives that we care a lot about. Like me surrounding myself around that became like my new family, not my blood family, but like these are like the brothers and sisters of my life. And I don't think to my knowledge, none of my siblings really have taken it to that level of depth. And I think that's a great word to describe it. I like really went deep, and I still go deep. Like I'm talking, I have a somatic breath coach that we go freaking deep. And my wife will like hear me moaning and yelling and shit. And, like not knowing what's going on up there, but it's hard work, but I continue to self-explore and continue to reparent little Michael, who was bullied. And I reparent who little Michael was with his insecurities and sneaking Twinkies into his bedroom, being 250 pounds overweight, going into high school, like pimpled kid, getting bullied, picked on. Like there were those versions of me that have deep, deep, deep insecurities. So I am consciously doing my best to reparent little Michael so I don't project those insecurities onto James and Ella. And that's why I'm going to another Front Row Dad retreat at the end of April in Key West with 50 other brothers so we can continue to unpack some of this stuff together in a safe space. That's not the only topic that we talk about, of course, but that is a topic that I brought up to the last one and I'm bringing up to this one. It's like continuing to reparent myself. It's hard. My wife would say it's unnecessary. I would say it is 100% necessary because I find myself getting triggered quite frequently with my 3-year-old toddler. James has been through a lifetime of challenge by 3 years old, and he will throw his tantrum like any other toddler. And I find it in my body triggering. And it is something that is natural for a parent, but I want to make sure I'm like parenting myself at the same time as I'm parenting him. And man, Amy, that shit is hard. It is
Yep.
very hard. So, these are some of the things, again, just kind of rambling at this point, but I think that's a difference maker between what I've witnessed. I mean, I was spanked with a belt and a shoe, and, I've seen that happen in my family. So it's like, man, there's times I'm like, I'm gonna bust that out. But then I know from all the learning, it's like, not the best strategy. It actually doesn't really, solve the problems, So I'm trying to take what I know and apply it to the doing. And that partnership I have with my wife, I feel like it's really good. I asked her last night, I said, hey, how are we doing right now? Like, I want to make sure, I get some feedback going into the retreat in 6 weeks. And I want to bring up intentions because I asked her that question about a month ago and I was messing up. I wasn't even aware I was messing up. It was like what do we call that? Well, I call it unintentional ignorance, I think is what I said. It's like an unintentional, it's like I'm not intentionally doing a bad job. I'm not like, oh, this is going to make you mad. Let me do it. It's like
Mhm.
this unintentional ignorance, but I want to do better. I want to be better. If I don't know, or she's like, but I talked to you about it. I'm like, yeah, I messed up. That's want to check it up. I didn't hear it the way it was I needed to. So that was about a month ago, and I asked her the question last night. I'm sure some things maybe will unfold, but she said, "I think you've recovered pretty well. You're doing pretty good. I think we're good." I was like, "Cool." And if we're not, it's not bad. I just want to know like what is something that I can do a better job with as a dad, as a husband, because that's important to me. She feels weird when I ask her those questions, but I think it's appropriate. And that wasn't the case always. But anyway, let me kick it back to you.
I love that there's so much that you said that I'm just like, as you can tell, I write the entire time that I have just incredible guests, and your comments are just, they're so real and they're so raw, and I love the intentionality, but I also know that going through things like that with your child and or just so many challenges, it brings that trauma. And I think, we can either choose to just keep continuing to put it underneath the rug to where the rug is so tall you can't see over the rug anymore, or you can really dive in, like you said, and just unpack a lot of that baggage, whatever it looks like. And in your situation, it's so interesting because it's so cool that you were able to step away from your job and that you and your wife were able to be there for your child, your son, because I remember being in the hospital with Madison for so long, and it was just so heart wrenching that there was either maybe one parent there and sometimes no parents there. And it was just so interesting. I mean, was that something that you guys, just initially said, we're both going to be there for him? I mean, how did you decide, who stays and, does one of us get to go home for a little bit? I mean, because when a child is in the hospital and they can't go home, that's a tough thing. And you really have to make those hard decisions. And sometimes you don't know if the other person, what they're feeling and if they're saying is really truthful. And it's so emotional and so raw and real.
Well, I feel it right now. Like I just feel it in my chest as it's like, as we're talking through it. I mean, it is a hard, unpredictable winter season. And I could only share from my experience and my lens. And that's what's real for me. And my wife might have a different side of it. And, her experience might be different than mine. But from my experience, she had severe preeclampsia, which is why we delivered James early. And I did not know she like self-diagnosed, like the doctors didn't even freaking catch it. Like, so she is a researcher like crazy. And she will just stay there and research and all these Facebook groups and learning. Me, I'm like, I just trust that you'll, know what to do. Right. Like there was a point where she was like, I was caring for her, bed rest, and then we had to go to the hospital, and then she had the C-section, and there was a lot of trauma there. And then she was told, like, the doctors, like, hey, you might need some, medication, depression, all this stuff. And at that point in time, she was like on bed rest. They were talking about these medications. And my story in my head is like, we've never taken this stuff before, these oxy or whatever. Like, there was a legitimate concern of mine that what if my wife was going to possibly become addicted to this or become depressed due to our circumstance, because that's a real thing that you see in the movies or whatever. And I didn't know. And there's a piece of me that feels guilty about that. It's like, how did I not know my wife is a fucking badass and is going to be able to do all the things that she did? But there was also that like insecurity inside of me that I'm like, I don't know what to expect because this is all brand new. So I just did one day at a time those first few days. So from New Year's Eve, I mean, it was only maybe a week, but it felt like forever, where she was on bed rest and I would go to the hospital, be there with James. I would go back home. I would make her food, take care
Mhm.
of her. She was on bed rest. I'd go back to the hospital, visit with James. There was nothing I could do.
Mhm.
It's just to back and forth was just so taxing and draining, and just didn't know. There was so much I did not know for that like very, very long week. And then Lindsay and I would go to the hospital. She would come too. Like, she would get out of bed and she would go, and we would just sit at the hospital. Then I would take her home because she was on bed rest, but she wanted to see James too. It was, like I said, it might have only been like 3 days. It might not even been a week, but it just felt like so long because the emotions were so high. And then there was at one point in time, I don't exactly know when, but she kept a blog every single day for like 2.5 years, 3 years. She still updates it once in a while. She's kept it, it's like almost 2,000 entries or something crazy that she's kept of this. So we could go through and I could figure out the day, but there was one day where she said, all right, I'm staying. It might have been day 4, it might have been day 10. I don't know the day, but she's like, I'm not leaving. And I was like, come on, dude. Like, babe, there's nothing for us to do here. And she's like, no, I'm just gonna stay. And there was like a little bed. And then this was right at the heat of COVID where only one parent can stay overnight. Like, one parent had to leave by like 8 p.m. or something like that, 9 p.m. every night or something like that. So we rotated. I spent 2 nights there and she would spend 5 nights there. We got into that rhythm. And during the days, I would come back and I would do whatever I could to clear the head. So it was about 4.5 miles. So there was a lot of times I would either bike ride there or walk there, walk home, because that was the only thing I could focus on. Movement, motion creates emotions. I didn't feel like listening to anything or learning anything. I just walked. It paced 60,000 steps a week was my target. I created a sheet of dad activities I wanted to do with James, and I would read those to him. I would read him books and listen to a lot of music that made me feel good. And that's all we could do, one day at a time. It was an emotional roller coaster every day, Amy. It was like, he's doing really well and he might not make it. He's doing great. He might not make it. That would be like in a 2 hour window. Like, it was just so many ups and downs. So to just try to stay as centered as possible for myself, for Lindsay, and also for James, super, super challenging every single day. And I would try to like add value to my business, but like, man, I wasn't able to do much. But what I did do is I was able to do things on the business to make things as easy as possible for my staff. So like, I built out an updated process for our website for the back end. So that way it could streamline some of the processes. So that way these 18 to 20-year-olds can have a little bit more predictable solution for some of the things that they were doing manually. So I would crank out on some of that stuff in the hospital, building some things on the back end for them. And then I would put on a shirt and tie and go to my office and record some videos of explaining some things to the users. So I built out a whole like onboarding and initial process, interviewing process, training process for our new recruits that can create predictable outcomes for my staff to just send these videos and send these resources to them. So it could be done by me, but it wouldn't be me. It would be recordings of me. So just like reimagining some of that. It wasn't done before. It was like, no, that's not going to be effective. And was it? I mean, we were the number 3 sales organization in the country and number 1 recruiting team in the country. I mean, it worked well and it was profitable. I would have never have known that that was a way of doing something if it wasn't for the circumstances that we were put in.
Mhm.
And just to capture it, I looked at in November of 2023 just to see like what has been created. So from September of 2021 to November in 2023, it was over $1 million in revenue that was created on the back end of figuring out how do I replace my wife's $80,000 a year. And that's not all like in my pocket, of course, but it's just that's how much was created for our company, just in general, just how much I was able to influence. And it's just pretty wild to think about the human potential when we're pushed up against the wall and say, let's figure it out. And it's almost like all the tests that I went through in the valley of my 20s and the tests of from the Tony Robbins stuff to my selling Cutco days to hiring the coach and all of it just kind of led to these moments. And now I'm here at this season. I'll be 39. And now I'm like questioning the purpose of my life with my somatic coach and questioning just like the next layer of during this fall season. I mean, I'm not in a grind season right now. I very much feel like we are through all of those crazy, unpredictable winters. And just now it's like finding joy in this season of life without the struggle, beyond the struggle, after the struggles. And it's a different season. And it has its own set of challenges, just a little bit different.
Yeah, again, I was just writing and writing. I do agree with you. I think it's amazing what we can accomplish when we're pushed up against a wall. Our back is against the wall. We have no other choice to be incredibly strong. You don't know how strong you are until you're put in those situations, and you do it or you don't. And I think that there are, a lot of different ways that we can look at it. And I think it's, once again, just really amazing that, you had the ability to do what you did and be able to be there for your son and be there for your wife. Because I think I went through with my daughter for so many years. That was one of my heartbreaks. It was one of my whys to figure out, what was happening. And then speaking with people for so many months now about going through traumatic situations like this and what happened to them and how they were able to get through it with their spouse and what did that look like. And a lot of it, the number one answer for these individuals was it was financial. It about financially crippled us. One had to quit their job, or both of them had to quit their job, or one had to go to work, like our situation, and I stayed in the hospital. And then that just puts so much emotional strain on everybody, not to mention what you're actually going through, with your child. So how is your wife? I mean, how is she coming through all that, and how is she now? And do you guys still talk about it at all? Does it come up in those conversations at all?
Well, Lindsay is a really strong human. I mean, she's the oldest of three girls, and she was strong-willed before us, before James, before everything. Very independent, has her master's, MBA. Her dad passed away. She essentially like took the patriarchal role of her family and real dominant leader type of personality. Her middle sister, like the one closest in age to her, said at our wedding, like in her bridesmaid speech, she was always a natural leader. Like that's my wife. The part of her that I saw most that I didn't experience before when we first got married is this aggressive researcher of like knowing and this need to know. Essentially, if it wasn't for all of that research that she did, James would not be alive because she was finding things that the doctors were missing. I mean, she right now to this moment, she's probably in like 100 different mom groups on Facebook, one for trach, one for well, he doesn't have the trach, but it's like one for the G tube, one for feeding, one for the formula itself, like all these different groups and just sources information from all these moms. It's this unbelievable community. And frankly, I didn't have that. There was a Dads of Trach Babies group that was a little bit of help. Once in a while, I went there for some help, but she was already on top of it. There was one group that was depressing for me, was a male factor IVF group, because everything that we went through was due to male factor IVF. So, I mean, the thousands of injections she had to go through, knowing that it was male factor, was some shit that I had to deal with and unpack. But that group, every post was like, yeah, my wife and I are getting divorced, can't do this anymore, this and that, like this is the worst. And I'm just like, I'm not in a position to coach any of you. And like, I'm here for counsel and support, but this isn't the type of support or counsel I wanted. One front row dad brother was helpful after James was born, but before James was born, when we were on the journey, I was on a lonely island. I didn't have front row dads because I wasn't a dad yet. So I was just keeping a vlog. I have like 21 videos of this that's private. I've made it public. It was just for me to capture from 2018 until my last one I just did like maybe a month ago of just like, I'm done. Like we hit the summit. I hit the peak. There's no more hills to climb. We're done. And I shared that story on the Front Row Dad podcast. So if anybody, I don't have to capture it here. If anybody want to listen to it, I was spotlighted there to tell that story. But the partnership that Lindsay and I have, I tell her all the time that we make a great team. I truly believe that. During different seasons, it was like, you go save us money, I'll make us money. And that's how this last season was, which is fighting with Medicaid, fighting with these insurance companies, fighting with the DME companies and the suppliers, and all that's all she does. You go save us money, I'll make us money. And that's like our partnership that we like spoken about and we created, because there was a feeling of her. She's like, my identity is I work. I'm a hard worker. I have my MBA. I have this corporate job, and now I'm a medical mom. Like, what the shit? Like, this sucks. My whole life is different. I'm like, you could still be this corporate person. Just go save us a ton of money. Like it was almost like an unspoken intention of like, you let that be your full-time gig. Just make sure our kid stays alive, stay healthy, and save us money. Like, I'll take care of the rest. And now in this season, it's just different. I mean, we moved into a new home. We have someone who comes and cleans the house. We have a nanny who comes as we need to help take care of James before James started school. If Lindsay, when she gets wants to take a break on a Thursday, the nanny will come and take care of our newborn Ella for a few hours, or just so Lindsay could kind of get a break, and I'll take a day so I could get a break. And like this Saturday, we usually do family day on Sunday, but this week we did family day on Saturday because it was a Celtic festival. And then I took James and we went on a bike ride and went to watch some live music and just went around St. Augustine so she could have a little bit of a break. It's not really that much of a break because you're still taking care of a 3-month-old, but it's a great partnership that her and I have created as a team. And I think I know what her love language is with acts of service. So I try to do my best to do those things to meet her where she's at. And she knows my love language is words of affirmation. So she'll use that to her advantage as much as possible. And I journal a lot. I reflect as much. I try to process my own emotions so I don't dump those onto her. I do not give myself a perfect score on that. In fact, it's probably in the past, sometimes it's been like a D minus and sometimes it's been like an A minus, but different seasons for it. That is an intention I try to bring into the relationship, where it's like any of my little boy energy or, any of those insecurities, trying not to bring that into my marriage, trying to self-regulate before I bring that into the relationship. And again, it's a lot easier said than done. It's very tough to, be this perfect human and not like settle into these emotions that come up. But it is the intention that's there. And there's a great book that by David Dita, The Way of the Superior Man, that I've read, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. That was super helpful for our partnership in that regard. The counsel that I would give to anybody who asks is, as far as the communication goes, I know it's like, yeah, you just got to communicate. The real piece of that is the individual must communicate with themselves, not their partner. And I think that's what has helped us a lot, because if I was not dealing with my own stuff individually, it would have added that much more tension to the relationship, because now I'm bringing my shit into her, and then she's also bringing her stuff to the party. And there's got to be one, I don't want to say leader, but one facilitator of those emotions. And I chose that to be me. And whoever's listening to this, it's probably you. You're probably the facilitator of that, because you're the one that has the capacity to learn and to learn in this way, while your partner's probably learning in a different way. If you're learning in this way, I would encourage you to put on that hat and say, all right, oh, that's my role for the relationship. My role for the relationship is to handle me, handle my stuff, communicate with me, reflect, journal, breathe, learn, add community, add coaching, add therapy, add whatever I can do to reparent and work me, so I could bring the highest version of myself to the relationship. And that requires energy. And that energy is sometimes not there. And when there's fatigue, That's when my coward shows up and I project these insecurities and I do not win those battles. In fact, everybody loses those battles, lots of casualties in those lower energy moments. So the awareness is important. That would be the counsel I would give
Yeah.
to anybody, and not bringing that burden to your partner.
I agree, and I think you touched on something really cool too. I know we have about 10 minutes left, but you really touched on some really cool things that I think, I've been pondering for the last, gosh, almost 10 years that I've been through it, and our family has been through it. And, I wrote the book because I needed just that outlet and to really just deal with my own stuff. But it was really interesting to start researching. And when I was in the hospital, I researched just like your wife. I was just a research fanatic, just researched everything I possibly could. And how in the heck are we going to get out of here alive? What is that going to look like? And so that was one huge thing of just, my husband and I not being on the same page. He worked and I was in the hospital, and just roller coaster of emotions. But it was the sleeplessness. It was that total and utter exhaustion, and you say things you don't mean, you think things that aren't actually real and happening. It's almost like an out of body experience. But I think with my research and that sleeplessness and what that can do to you, and suicide, and just such traumatic things, when you don't take care of yourself, but also you don't deal with your own baggage, and then you try to come together, and it can be just utterly explosive. And in the world we live in right now, it's not overly sexy or cool to talk about, hey, I went to counseling today, or, sometimes it's hard to find those people that are going to be like, oh, that's cool. How was your counseling today? And, just that type of conversation. Or you don't know how, any of those certain friends sometimes are ever going to take those conversations unless you meet just some amazing people, kind of like the front row dads. And I recently had Larry Hagner on my podcast, and just, the dad edge, and just all these cool men that are already talking about some of this stuff. And you're like, oh, okay, maybe that is, okay to talk about. So I applaud everything that you're saying right now. I think it's really important for the audience to take a look at that and really dig deep. Yeah.
I have one thing I want to say, and I think this is something that probably comes being a mama's boy and having a little bit of that lens of I can empathize with how
Mm.
freaking hard it is to be a mom. And I just like sometimes I'll be here in my office and I'll be back to back from like, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., just calls after calls, and I'll get out. And then I'm like, there's a piece of me, it's like, I'm the hero, man. I just rocked the day. I crushed it. And then I'm like, I just want to sit down and just, chill. And I'm like, what I did was freaking easy compared to dealing with these two kids and dealing with, the phone calls and all this stuff. And then it's like breastfeeding. And before that was like pumping in the hospital. It's like, when you said sleeplessness, I mean, I think there was like one night that we slept in the same bed, and Ella was like crying hysterically and every couple hours. And I'm like, this is awful. And Lindsay was just like, it doesn't make sense for both of us to like not get any sleep. So I took James and, made up one of the bedrooms upstairs for us to sleep together. And that's a perfect example of partnership. But the sleeplessness is real, man. Like I could not imagine day after day after day after day, the same damn shit, dealing with phone calls, dealing with a crying baby, diapers, feeding, repeat, whining, crying, tantrums. I would go absolutely insane. Some of these men would say, well, moms are wired a little bit differently and they just have that nurture component where it just comes natural to them. No effing way. Maybe there's some truth to that, but no way. That shit is so hard and emotionally draining and fatiguing and tiring. And I can see it, I experience it. So in those moments at 5 p.m., I'm like, hey, what can I help with? Did you eat yet? Like I'll put something in the microwave. I could get something, right? Like in those moments, like I'll empty the dishwasher, put the dishes in the dishwasher, like, because again, I know it's acts of service, but I also know it's like, I want her to know that I see like this sucks and it's hard. Not even that it sucks, it's just hard. And I think that's important. I think it's important to make that known. And the sleep in the hospital, shit. She was there every single day, pumping, pumping and cleaning bottles. Like that was what was my job. My job was to try to help her make sure she could go get food because we couldn't bring food into the NICU. So you could go downstairs. So it's like, give her a chance to go get food. And when she comes back, having some of those bottles cleaned, that's about the best I can do, possibly. I would sneak her in a couple of snacks, like, hey, just in case you get hungry in the middle of the night, so you don't have to go downstairs. That's about the best I can do. But man, it is hard. It's just a different type of hard. And I think the men need to truly just try it out, try it out for a couple of days or a season and just experience it. Take 2 sick days off of your work and be mom or just shadow mom. I'm like, it is hard work and the sleeplessness is real. And I try to ask myself the question of who am I talking to right now? That's a question I ask myself. Which version of my wife am I talking to? Is this the fatigued, tired version of her that's probably like the 13-year-old that is pissed off at dad for some reason? It's like, okay, if that's who I'm talking to right now, I got to make sure I realize that that's who I'm talking to. And then sometimes it's like, is this the dedicated leader? I'm getting shit done. Get out of my way. I don't have time for you at this moment. If that's the version of her, like that was last night, by the way. And like, I'm sitting at the trash can, like I'm eating cherries and spitting the pits into the trash can. And she's like trying to get shit done. She's like, you're fucking gross. And I'm like, how else are you supposed to eat cherries? Like I was intentionally trying to lighten things up because I knew she was like really into the zone. I like kind of tickle her and hug her and stuff. And she's like, I fucking hate this. But I feel called, like knowing my personality, that is the best way I could show up to try to bring a little bit of a light into a very like, got to get stuff done situation. And I got that from the way of the superior man of like, I still wanted to own, she's in the masculine, get shit done. And I want to bring a big grown up energy to this and to the space of, I could be playful in this moment. Like I don't have to match your intensity at this moment, not right now, right? But anyway, I digress a little bit. This has been fun, just exchange, Amy, and I appreciate you bringing up some things I haven't maybe talked about. And because most of my podcast episodes, I've done about 60 of these now, are about like the business and the success in the business and how we help business owners. And, I know obviously you're using our services, but it's like a lot of people want to talk about that because a lot of individuals that are these high earning business owners with families, they want to get their time freedom. Like that's important to them. They're like, give me the tips on how do you get time freedom? And we didn't really get into that today, but I will say if any of your listeners are interested in that, I'm doing right now free 90-day delegation planning sessions. It's 40 minutes with me. You'll get a time audit workbook, figure out what your time is worth, what are the tasks to offload, and what are your high value tasks. I spend 40 minutes with you figuring some of that stuff out. And then if our services make sense, I could tell you a little bit about that. You can go to betterthanrich.com/90-day plan. That's 90-day plan. betterthanrich.com/90-day plan. And it will go directly to my calendar. There'll be a time audit workbook in the notes there with a link, a hyperlink to click. And you'll get directly to me right now. So depending on when this airs, but I've been doing these, I've been having a lot of fun doing market research, figuring out the needs in the marketplace while also adding a ton of value to whoever's in front of me.
I think that's great. Yeah. And it might be, kind of on my creation of these next podcasts I'm thinking about doing is like, where are they now? What's next? But also really preparing for all of the challenges that will land on your doorstep. It's not, if something will happen to you, it's when and how are you going to show up and how are you going to be there and what does that look like? So I think this is really cool. I will make sure when everything comes out, everybody will have Mike's information on the social media. We'll have it on our newsletter that we're getting ready to put out. The podcast, everything will be there. But I think it'll be really great to maybe have another conversation with you, really dive into this because it'll really kind of go into the next thread of, kind of my next book and my coaching and kind of the things you and I haven't even really talked about of dealing with how are you going to prepare? What does that look like? And I think the better preparing we can do, better. That's great. And if nothing ever happens to you in your life that ever challenges you, more power to you. If it does, you'll be much more prepared. So we'll put that on there. And then what's the best place for people to find you? Is it betterthanrich.com or what do you suggest?
If you want to get directly to me, betterthanrich.com/90-day plan,
Okay.
you will get directly to me. Everything else is probably one of my 14 virtual assistants acting as me. but that will get directly to me and you'll hop right on my Zoom. So
That sounds great. I love it. Well, Mike, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and everybody out there, we always appreciate your time. So definitely look Mike up. We'll have all this information, and have a great day. Thanks, guys.